Hello, my name is David Kerr. I'm the head of programs at the Africa Oxford Initiative. Thank you very much for making time for this call on a Tuesday evening. Thanks very much for making time for the AfOx Visiting Fellowship program info section. I'm delighted to have two of our previous visiting fellows on the call who are going to share their experiences of making applications to come to Oxford and some of their experiences of being here in Oxford as AfOx visiting fellows. And then we're also delighted to have an Oxford collaborator with us on the call who share some of their experiences from the point of view of the collaborator. We've just opened the call for the 2024-25 AfOx Visiting Fellowship Programme, which will be open until the end of the 31st of May this year. The Visiting Fellowship Programme is an interdisciplinary programme open to all disciplines. So anyone from any academic discipline is able to apply. We have a range of strategic partnerships, which you can see on our website, but you can apply outside of those. So there are strategic partnerships, but you can also apply if none of those strategic partnerships apply for you. The fellowship is a 12-month fellowship, of which 10 months of the fellowship is virtual. So that's speaking to your collaborator, it's access to the library resources and some of the online training resources that are here at Oxford. Fellows have often given seminars, been part of research groups, have spoken at events, and have engaged with the kind of infrastructure of the university virtually. And then there are a 2-month in-person fellowship during May and June each year. If you're not able to find a collaborator this year, then you can apply. The fellowship program will open again on roughly the same timeline next year. So I think, if you're not able to find a collaborator this year in Oxford, then you can always think about applying next year. And one of the pieces of advice I would give would be that the application is open until the end of May. There's time to begin a collaboration with someone in Oxford. There's time to have conversations, to share your research profile, and to start building a relationship with someone in Oxford. But if those emails aren't responded to, or if people are not able because of their workload or because of their going to be on sabbatical to take up a collaboration, then I think rather than try to force the issue, is the timeline becomes close because you really need a fruitful collaboration. Then it's best maybe to think about collaborating next year. I'm delighted to have two of our visiting fellows from last year on the call, and I'm going to hand over to Dr. Sarah Nabachwa from the Department of Procurement and Marketing at Murara University of Science and Technology in Uganda, to tell you a little bit about her journey, how she developed a collaboration, and what her experience of being in Oxford was. So Sarah, over to you.
Thank you, David. I'm Sarah Nabachwa. I'm a marketing lecturer in the Faculty of Business and Management Sciences of Murara University, Uganda. I actually got to know about AfOx through their newsletter, Touch. So I read the call, and it required that I had to have a collaborator from the University of Oxford. Now, I didn't know anybody at Oxford, and I also did not know anybody who knew anybody at Oxford. And for the longest time, I'd actually wanted to write business teaching case studies that are locally contextualized to the business operating environment of Uganda. And so I thought this was an amazing opportunity for me to go to Oxford and learn about, how to write a case study. But I didn't know where to start because I didn't know anybody at Oxford. So I went to Google and I keyed in business school at the University of Oxford. And then Sayid Business School was listed. So I went to Sayid Business School, and then I wanted to get the faculty. First, I wanted marketing, but I was like, okay, I'm doing, entrepreneurs. So I went to the faculty. I keyed in entrepreneur faculty at Sayid Business School, University of Oxford. And then I got a very long list of professors. So what I decided to do was to sit down and read every profile of every professor. Most of them have done amazing work. So I landed on this professor that had done some work in Sub-Saharan Africa, and she had actually been to Uganda. So I knew this was my professor because I was going to write about street smart entrepreneurs. And if anybody has been to Uganda, to Kampala, they will definitely know the kind of street smart entrepreneur that I was going to write about. So I knew this was my professor. So I wrote to her, I attached my proposal, and in 2 days, Ifa responded. She said, in part, I'm very excited, but unfortunately, I'm a little committed somewhere, but I have sent your proposal to one of my colleagues who actually is very excited about it. So she introduced me, Sarah, meet Paulo, Paulo, meet Sarah. So immediately, Professor Paulo Savagit writes back to me, and I found that very interesting that, these are busy professors, but he picked interest in my work. And so we connected, and he said, okay, let's go and fill in the form. So I started filling in the form, but I think I made a mistake somewhere. And what I need to note here is that once I finalized the form, I sent to the AfOx, and then Paulo was like, Sarah, I did not get anywhere where I'm supposed to upload the recommendation. So I reached out to the AfOx team, and I found them very supportive because they then cleared the entire process, and then I filled again, and then Paulo the other end was able to upload the recommendation. So yes, that was the first phase of the application, which was I feel it was very exciting. Even getting these professors to get back to me. When I got the fellowship, I reached out to Paulo, and of course I copied in Ifa. Ifa was very happy to send back that information and say, okay, Sarah, I will be very glad to work with you. So I didn't have only one, but I had two collaborators at the Business School, and they set up a meeting, and we started having conversations before the actual, as AfOx was actually cleaning the entire process of how to come. And so we started the conversation, me and Ifa and Paulo, and I told them about what I want and what I want to do, and they're very excited about the entire process. So the AfOx team was also very helpful because the entire process from the time I started to the time when I went to Oxford and up to when I finished the entire year, I think they were very helpful and very supportive. I got to Oxford and I got amazing opportunities. One of them, I presented at the Pora conference. That was an amazing experience for me. We also used to, I met, I think 12, maybe 14 fellows or AfOx that come from all corners of Africa. And that was a very rich culture experience for me. Every Friday we would actually meet at one of the balconies of, in our residence, and and so we would cook and we would dance and we would talk about, where we come from. And I think it was a very rich experience. Yes, for now, let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for sharing your experience and your tips on how to successfully make an application for an AfOx fellowship. We've had lots of questions in the Slido, so I think at the end of everyone's introductions, we'll be coming back perhaps for some kind of more details about that. I'm going to ask Joseph Mlinzi, who's a lecturer in mathematics at the University of Eswatini and was also an AfOx visiting fellow last year, to talk a little bit about his experience of identifying a collaborator, beginning speaking for that collaborator, and then eventually of coming to Oxford. So Joseph, over to you.
Thanks, David. My story is not really different from that of Sarah's. I got to know about AfOx from a colleague of mine. I hope I'm audible. Yeah, I got to know about AfOx from a colleague of mine who had been on the same program in 2019. So when he traveled, obviously, then he, through maybe posts on on Facebook and WhatsApp statuses, I got to know that he had traveled. And so I asked him about AfOx, and he sent me the AfOx website. Then in 2020, I wanted to apply, but I think there was no call in 2020. Then 2021, when I wanted to apply, I got to know that one of the most important things is to actually find a collaborator. And so I did the same as Sarah. I went to the University of Oxford website and I Googled the Mathematical Institute and I Googled for the head and I wrote to the head. But what I did, I also copied the head of the mathematical biology center. So I just said, dear professors, I would like to apply for this program. I attached the link and I told them what I was interested in, collaborating with someone, learning more, getting more experiences and stuff like that. A few days later, the head of the Mathematical Institute responded to me. Actually, this is what happened. My apologies. I wrote to the head of the Mathematical Institute. And then a few days later, when he responded, he copied the head of the Wolfson Center for Mathematical Biology. That's Professor Philip Miney. And then Professor Philip Miney immediately responded and copied more other colleagues at the Center of Mathematical Biology. And you won't believe it, everyone responded to me and was showing, interest in working with me. So then they started sending me some of their work that they have done. Fortunately, for people like Professor Helen Byrne, that I ended up working with, I had read their work. So they started sending me some of their work and then, asking me what I wanted to do. We actually have a string of several correspondences over that email. And then eventually, I actually had to choose, I literally had to choose which professor I wanted to work with. And they were all genuinely willing to work with me. So eventually, I ended up choosing Professor Helen Byrne because she had worked on something that I was also proposing to work on. Fast forward, I started talking to Helen and then we put in the application. I think that was probably 2022. And then in December, I got a positive response. And yeah, and then I followed the prompts and that's how I came to Oxford. While at the University of Oxford at the Wolfson Center for Mathematical Biology, one thing I can attest to is the desire for every staff there and students to do research. And I don't know whether I should call it love, the love that I was showed, the love that I was given by all the postdoctoral fellows there, the students, the staff members. I was never stuck at anything, especially my research. So because whenever I would meet my collaborator, we would have some targets for the week. And I had a number of people to consult, especially the postdoctoral fellows and her PhD students. And everyone I was going to was actually willing to help. The other thing is that, all the amenities that you would want to carry out research, rather resources that you would need to carry out research, which is what I was looking for, they were readily available. So for me, that was really a rich experience. I'm still working with Helen on the same project. If it's necessary, I can talk about it later. And we have actually, again, applied for a Catalyst grant to enable me travel to the University of Oxford and work with her. The essence of these fellowships, in my opinion, especially for me, or rather the visits, is that they would allow me to focus on the project. So because while at the university, for example, I have so many other engagements to do with teaching rather. So then you don't get ample time to do your research. Whereas if you go and visit, and then the only thing that you'll be focusing on will actually be your work, and you have many other people to support you. So that's what I can say for now.
Joseph, that's wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing your experience and your guidance on how others might make successful applications. I can see that the Slido is busy. There are lots of comments and questions in there. And so before we get to your questions, I'm going to hand over to Professor Mike English, who's leader of the Health Systems Collaborative Group at the Nuffield Department of Medicine, very close friend and collaborator of AfOx. And so I'm going to ask Mike to speak a little bit about what the experience is of being a collaborator, and from the point of view of a collaborator, what does successful collaboration look like, and what would his advice be on how you go about identifying and emailing and connecting with a collaborator. Thanks very much, Mike.
Thanks, and hello everybody. Sorry we can't see you all. So Joseph and Sarah have given you, I think, a very nice outline of what it's like to be the applicant side of things. Maybe I'll just give a little bit of insight in my experience of being at the receiving end of applications. So I guess there's a couple of things that just to emphasize, which have kind of been said. It's, you know, if you think about your own experience, I'm sure you've had plenty of students emailing you, or plenty of people emailing you. And the ones you take notice of are the ones that are a bit more interesting. So when you have lots and lots and lots of emails, if you clearly open an email and it's copy pasted and it's obviously been sent to 100 people, you know, and you've just had your name replaced and everything else in the thing is the same as it is to the other 100 people, then you know, you're not likely to pay it much attention, to be honest. So make your approach to people, which I think is what Joseph and Sarah did, make it interesting and make it meaningful. You know, you identify somebody by name, say you know something, you know, you've heard a little bit about what they do, and tell them a little bit about you, and what you work on, what you're interested in, and why it would be useful to have a collaboration. And I think, just as well, certainly Joseph said, you know, at this end of things, from the Oxford end, I think most people are curious. We're interested. You know, so if somebody comes along with something new, then for many of us, you know, it'll be interesting and worth responding to. I mean, I happen to have had the benefit of living and working in East Africa for 25 years. But many of my colleagues in Oxford have little or no experience of being in Africa and may not have many African links. So for many of them, they will see this as an opportunity to have something interesting and something new for them, and that's fine. So the person who is acting as a host may not want to get anything dramatic out of it, but something interesting, something fun potentially. And I maybe just to say, so I guess because I've lived and worked in Africa, I've had people approach me who maybe I'd already met at one point in my time there, or I were contacts of contacts, so contacts of people I've worked with. So if you can reach out across your networks, and if you know somebody who knows somebody in Oxford, who is in the right discipline or works on the right thing, then use those connections. It is a rewarding for the host as well, and I mean, I actually now have a long-term and quite generously funded collaboration with one of the AfOx fellows who didn't actually come to work with me, but who I met while she was a fellow, and it turned out that we had similar interests. So I think one of the other benefits people can get is not just working directly with the person who is hosting them, but actually getting exposed to many more people. I've also had the benefit of hosting a fellow who contacted me directly, and we're still in touch. We tried to put we did put in a collaborative grant. Unfortunately, it didn't get funded, but we're still talking about how to work together. So I guess let me stop there. I'm happy to answer any questions, but if you're going to approach people, make it sound like you want to talk to them and that you're going to be interesting, and you're more likely to get a response. But I'll stop there and pass back, David.
Mike, that's fantastic. I mean, those I think are a really good piece of advice that have been echoed through all of your kind of introductory remarks. Is this, make sure your approach that you've read someone's work, that you know what they work on, maybe something about the department that they're based in, make it targeted rather than sending the same blanket email to lots of people. Look for the right person. One question that's come in, I'd be interested from your side to hear about this, Mike, is how does someone, from an Oxford perspective, how do you think a prospective fellow would best identify a potential collaborator, kind of acknowledging that Oxford is a reasonably kind of devolved institution in which people with expertise might sit in a range of different departments. We have an AfOx database, but that doesn't necessarily capture everyone. And we encourage people to apply to work with people who have no background of working with researchers on the continent. This is something where you could apply because you have a common interest, but actually have worked in different locations. So this is not maybe a very easy question to answer. And I think both Sarah and Joseph have talked about their experience, but from the other side, would you have any advice on how someone identifies a collaborator?
Well, I think Joseph made a very useful observation. I think, Joseph, correct me if I'm wrong, you indicated that you had actually read some of the work of one of the people you've ended up linking with. So I'm sure you're, as academics or people who want an academic fellowship in Oxford, I'm sure you're reading in your subject area. So if one of the people's work who you're reading is in Oxford, that's a good place to start. Or I'm sorry, Oxford's websites are very distributed and not easy to navigate. That's partly because it's such a big university in terms of research. But if you think you've found somebody on the website, then pretty much everybody's profiles has links to their publications, has links to some of their projects. So, check a few of the things out, find out if they're doing the kind of things that you work on or that you want to learn about. So it will require a bit of homework, I'm afraid. And I also think Joseph and Sarah both had the experience of writing to one person but being passed on to somebody else. So I think it's fine to approach somebody and say, I'm generally interested in this area. Your department or your group seems to do things. I realize you might be very, very busy, but perhaps one of your postdocs or senior postdocs or associate professors or colleagues would be interested. So target who you're applying to, but I think it's reasonable to be open about who you would actually work with. Over.
That's fantastic advice, Mike. Thanks very much for that. One of the other questions that we've had coming up in the chat, I'll hand this over to Sarah and then Joseph for their thoughts on this, is what should you do if a collaborator you've approached hasn't replied to an email? I mean, how many emails, and maybe then Mike, you can come back to this, how many emails is it reasonable to send to someone? I would sort of suggest maybe 2 or 3. People are very busy, their inboxes are full. People have lots of competing. They're teaching, they're possibly away on research leave. You know, there are lots of things going on in Oxford. But what do you do if someone hasn't responded to an email? How do you go about maybe identifying possible other collaborator, or what would your approach have been to that? And I'll hand over to Sarah first and then Joseph.
Thank you. That's a tricky one because sometimes you don't want to really sound rude, because if you give 720 emails, that it may be a little irritating. But for the first email, put in the energy, put in some work. It has to be interesting. Be sure to write to this person, showing what they will also benefit. You know, it's supposed to be a win-win situation. Maybe if you're in your email, yes, you're supposed to be polite, but show interest, that you're genuinely interested in working with them. But at least you need to put a line where you would make them feel there is something, you know, they will gain working with you. And I think, I don't think anybody will not respond to you first time. And what I also believe, like Ifa was busy, and genuinely she was busy, but she passed on the proposal to somebody else. So I believe that opportunity also, you know, can happen. So it's a tricky one, but please don't send so many emails. It may be very irritating. That's what I think.
Thanks very much, Sarah. And Joseph, I don't know if you had reflections on how you might respond.
Yeah,
I think it sounded like your first email was answered, but if that hadn't happened, what would your response have been?
Yeah, that's a good question. To be honest, I've been lucky that not at any single time have I written to an author of a paper or anybody out there and they didn't respond. So I don't know what I'll do if I wrote an email to a potential collaborator and they don't respond. But I think after 2 trials, it's best you then, I don't know. So like Sarah said, the email, your first email needs to be polite. It needs to be official as well. And also for it not to appear as spam, for me, sometimes I attach my my CV. Especially if I have to introduce myself, I've never met this person anywhere, then sometimes I would attach my CV. So to answer the question, David, I don't know, but what I would do is I would try maybe after a month or 2 and nudge the person to say, I would like to kindly bring your attention to this email or whatever. Yeah, and after 2 trials, maybe then move on. Yeah.
And so, Joseph, I can ask you quickly a follow-on question just before I come to Mike, would be, so what is it that's made you so successful at having responses to your emails then? What is it that you put in your emails that has made you so successful in garnering collaboration and working with colleagues?
Really, like I've said, David, it's to be polite. So I wouldn't address you as David the first time when I've never met you. Now I can call you David. But before that, I would say, dear Professor David Carr. Okay. And then little bit of introducing yourself and what you do, your area of research. And sometimes myself, I would attach my CV in such situations where I want maybe write a grant with a professor who doesn't even know me, so that they really know if their area of research somehow has to do with what I'm doing. And then for the AfOx case, the Wolfson Center of Mathematical Biology has about 80 staff members. At my university, I am the center of mathematical biology. So, so definitely the chances are higher to, you know, to get a response from any of those. Definitely, if there are those who are doing something that you're also doing, they would be interested in reaching out to you. And like I said, I was surprised. There are really good people out there. There are really good people out there. I'm sorry for mentioning that, but I mean, and yeah.
David, may I mention something very quickly, adding to what Joseph said? When I was writing paper, I did not write in 1 hour and I finished the email. I just remembered, I think it took me some 16 hours. Like I after finding that this is the professor I think I need to work with, I read about her profile, and then I started to compose my letter. And I did not send it in a go. I took time to read it and see if it actually, for whatever I've read in her profile, if it's, and then I would come back to it. I would close my computer, then come back to it. And then I think I sent it the following day, but I made sure that every word was right. At least the first letter. I think I took time to compose my words and my story.
Fantastic. I think that's a really good advice, to take time over writing an email, even though it may seem like a very basic task, but taking time to make sure it's clear, what your own research strengths are, how they intersect with the people you want to work with, what scheme you're applying for, and make sure you link to the scheme, because not everyone in Oxford will have heard of the AfOx Visiting Fellowship Programme. Make it clear what the requirements for that programme are, so they're clear what you're asking them to do. I think it is all really good advice, making sure you take time to make all those things clear. And then, Mike, as someone who I'm sure receives many of these emails, I wonder what your reflections on what your advice would be if someone isn't getting a response from a potential collaborator.
Yeah, I think Sarah and Joseph have said, really useful things. Maybe one thing to think about is which email address you're using. I would try and use an institutional email address, not your Yahoo address. I think Sarah just said it. Make sure you reference the AfOx Visiting Fellows Program, possibly even in the email title. And as David says, you might want to put a link to the program there, because most academics won't know of it. Well, particularly, many in the health sphere probably do. But it's certainly, I guess if you're applying for, something in the humanities, people may well not have heard of it. So definitely do that. And yeah, and again, I'm repeating what Sarah said. It shouldn't look like spam. That's the bottom line. It's have a little something a bit personal in it fairly early on. Yeah, and in terms of numbers of times, obviously if you get lots of out of office replies, then that's clear. If you're getting no reply and nothing, then you look at the team. Maybe you can approach, another senior person in the team and say, look, I had written to Professor so-and-so or assistant professor so-and-so. They may be busy and haven't had a response. So make it clear that, that you have made a prior response, but maybe identify another person in the team who might respond to you. And because I don't know what Sarah and Joseph's experiences like, but you're often joining a team, not an individual. So if you spread things out around the team, that's okay. That doesn't mean endlessly email everybody, but but don't feel that you can't approach another member, and even copy in the person originally. As Joseph says, being polite and saying it may be because everybody's too busy, but I thought I'm really keen to do this, so I thought I'd follow up. That kind of thing. Over.
Yeah, I think all of those are really good advice, and critical, that often that is how the fellowship works, is you're not coming to work with just one individual, you are part of a team. And as Mike had said earlier, we found this with a number of the fellows, the longer term collaborations are not always with the person that you started the collaboration with, but with other colleagues you developed a relationship with while you were in Oxford. And I wonder whether all three of you, so we've had some questions about this, all three of you have mentioned ongoing collaborations. And I wonder if you could quickly talk a little bit about that experience, how that came about, whether that was your expectation at the start of the fellowship. So I'll ask Sarah, then Joseph, then Mike to speak to that.
Thank you, David. So yes, I was writing business case studies that are locally contextualized to the Ugandan market, and I wanted to get to learn how to write a business case study. I didn't know what that actually meant, and so the professors were very helpful. So part of the collaboration, not that they are well written, in business case studies. It was actually a learning experience for the three of us, and they made sure to write as many emails introducing me to as many people that write case studies that they know at Said Business School. Actually, I was also connected to people at Harvard Business School that write case studies. I got in so many meetings with a number of people from South Africa who would actually be online, me and Paulo and Ifa with another colleague from, say, South Africa, or maybe it's in Botswana. And they would, connect me to other, links. I actually got an opportunity to get connected to Case Center. I didn't know about Case Center. And yeah, currently they've thrown a scholarship for people who write case studies. If I made sure that I get to the library, I get the right books, and all these were connections because of the collaboration. Yes.
Sorry, David, I didn't hear your question. I think my network is intermittent.
Yeah, sorry about that, Joseph. I wonder if you could speak a little about your ongoing collaboration, how that came about, and whether that was your expectation at the point of application, that you would lead to an ongoing collaboration.
Yeah, so the application process requires you to actually apply with your collaborator. And for my case, I'm working with a really lovely professor, Professor Helen Bine. So we are modeling the synergistic interactions of oncolytic viruses, whatever that means. Oncolytic viruses, it's a cancer treatment. And so we wrote the proposal together. We're meeting almost on a weekly basis, sometimes twice a week. We put the proposal together. I came to Oxford. We were meeting twice or three times a week. It's the same project that we are working on. It's not an easy thing. Of course, if you wanted to, because the whole idea, again, is to do meaningful research. So we've been able, again, through Helen's networks, we've been able to talk to experimentalists, people who have actually set up experiments where two oncolytic viruses are being used to lyse cancer cells. And so in doing so because with the project that we are working on, it's difficult to get longitudinal data, but are the people that carry out these experiments. So that's the same project that we are working on. And we hope that, again, by me finding some time to go and work with her, we shall be able to make more progress. So currently, we've been able to set up the models, we've been able to simulate them, and now we are carrying out mathematical analysis. And hopefully, we can do some model calibration if we get more data. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question. I could be completely. It's because I was off and I didn't hear the original question. Sorry about that.
No, that's wonderful, Joseph. I think you've answered the question really fully, and I'm going to hand over to Mike to give his experience of collaborating with an AfOx fellow, but from the Oxford collaborators' perspective.
Yeah, thanks. So I've got a range of experiences. So when I directly hosted a fellow who had applied to come and spend some time with our group, the purpose of him wanting to come to spend time with us was because he wanted to write a grant proposal. So he came with that in mind, and during the period he was with us in Oxford, we slowly developed what that proposal would look like. He wanted to study, he was a public health researcher, and he wanted to study how telehealth was being implemented in Ghana. But it took another few months after he'd returned back to Ghana of continuing online work. And then he submitted a proposal as principal investigator to one of the UK research councils. It had actually scored very highly at peer review, but it wasn't funded. But we're still in touch, and I'm helping. Well, we're collaborating, and he's writing a paper, and I'm contributing some advice to his writing a paper at the moment. But the accidental connection, which came about, has resulted in a fully funded proposal, which allows me to work with the Professor Letitia Rispel, who was from Wits, or is from Wits University in South Africa. So she was the visiting fellow. But essentially, we put together a proposal between her and my Kenyan colleagues and Ugandan team, also who I knew a bit, but knew because one of the postdocs had a Catalyst grant with me. And essentially, we put together a 3-country proposal, which did get funding. And so we will be continuing to work together over the next 5 years. So in that sense, it worked very well. Over.
Fantastic, Mike, Joseph and Sarah. Thanks for sharing all of your experiences. I've seen a few comments in the chat on YouTube about kind of the eligibility requirements, which are probably my questions to answer. The fellowship is open to all countries in the African continent, all institutions across all disciplines, at a variety of postdoctoral career stages. So you should be at PhD or equivalent career stage, but it's then open across all disciplines and all countries on the continent. I think we're going to draw this conversation to a close, but the kind of final question we have is, what advice do you have for applicants? If there were advice you were going to give to applicants, what would that advice be? So I'm going to hand back to Joseph to answer that question.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think I would say be real, be authentic, do quality research. That's how you can then attract highly rated researchers, especially at a university like the University of Oxford. So yeah, the advice would be, and also to try. If, of course, for me, yes, I on first try I was successful for the AfOx, but there are other fellowships that I failed to get. There are other funding opportunities that I failed to get, or even there are other people that I've wished to work with, and then they said, no, I am not available to work with you, or I'm not interested in the kind of work that you are doing. So yeah, again, just be you, do you, and continue doing quality research. Yeah.
Be you and do you is fantastic advice, and keep doing quality research, Joseph. And I hand over to Sarah to answer that question.
I guess it comes down to value. What is the value of your research proposal? And again, like Joseph is saying, be you, do you. So yes, what is the value of that work? If you believe in the research that you actually are doing, you're passionate about it, that passion can spill over. If you actually, somebody will feel that energy. If you're really passionate and you know this is what I really want to do, and indeed it's good, you think it's good research and it will come to some good, conclusions that can benefit our community, go for it.
That's wonderful. I think go for it is also really wonderful advice. And then, Mike, I don't know what your reflections are.
I don't think I can add anything more to what's been said, to be honest. I think we all want to work with good colleagues, good collaborators. So make yourself sound like and be a good collaborator. Yeah, so I think Sarah and Joseph have said it all over.
Fantastic. So I think that kind of drawing our conversation to a close. I want to thank Joseph, Mike, and Sarah very much for making time for this call and sharing their wealth of experience and expertise and resources. We really hope you'll make applications for the AfOx Visiting Fellowship Program. As I said, the applications are open until the 31st of May. So please, go and look for collaborators on the website. Do those things early, identify collaborators, take time over your approach. Think about where there are research synergies, as Mike, Sarah, and Joseph have said, and then good luck with your applications. Thanks very much for making time for this. Cool.